Hi, everyone. It's Pamela, your holistic grief educator, grief coach, and grief coaching mentor. Welcome into the workshop today, which is the 3 ways to help support people in grief who sorry, I'm just letting people in here. Hi. 3 ways to support people with a holistic grief approach. And I'm so honored that you're sharing some time with me. I really appreciate it. I love teaching these workshops and I love sharing my protocol. And what I'm not crazy about is the tech right now because it seems to be linking up with my phone. So, can you all see me? I hope you can see me. And I'm also live streaming this as best I can into the private Facebook group. The replays will be in the Healers and Helpers Facebook group. So if you're not already a member there, please make sure that you request membership. Can I get a wave to make sure that everyone can see me and hear me? Okay, thank goodness. The tech is always changing. It's a thing. You just have to work around it. And so I want to say a little bit about how I'm running this particular workshop. I'm going to have 3 days. Today is 3 ways, 3 specific ways and tools to support someone with a holistic approach. And tomorrow is going to be about working beyond the 5 stage model. And then Monday, I'm doing a bonus class that is about kind of your place in the work, how turning whatever your life experience has been and is, whether you're a caretaker, whether you've had loss yourself, whether you've had your own trauma, how to find a place where you're able to turn these life experiences into more purpose and instead of having them kind of take you down, as I like to say, how to use them to help the world and to help support other people. So let's get started on today's workshop. Now, there was a handout that I emailed everyone, and if you don't have that, let me know, and I can try to resend that. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what a holistic approach even means. I work with many different types of people, some of whom are quite familiar with holistic work, and others who want a little explanation. So, to me, a holistic approach is very much using all aspects of a person. And I'm going to share my little screen here for a second so that um, I keep on track. And this is your homework that I sent out. And it talks a little bit about, I like to have you kind of bring your own experience into this work. In everything I do when I'm training people, mentoring people taking my courses, yes, it's information. Yes, it's tools and it's inspiration and it's insight, but it is nothing if you don't take it in and use it in your way with your voice. I think of you all as like light catchers. You want to bring in this work, but you want to give it out to the world and to others in your unique and beautiful way. So, the aspects of holistic grief support, the model would be including and honoring the mind, the body, the autonomic nervous system, which is, I have ANS in here, the emotions, of course, the heart, the spirit, and the soul. And not only do these aspects of self, which are the definition of a holistic experience for a person, not only do they bring their own experience of grief to the table with everyone, the mind grieves differently than the other aspects of a person. The emotions have their own grief experience. The autonomic nervous system certainly has its own experience because that is the keep you alive, keep you safe system in the body. The emotions we know have their own experience. Spirit has its own experience of grief. So in a holistic model, what we want to do is acknowledge and bring awareness to each aspect of these parts of a person. It's not just an emotional experience where someone is sad and they're feeling the loss and the separation and the loss of attachment. The mind is grieving as well. The mind looks to problem solve, the mind looks to assign an exact story to make sense of things. Well, grief is rarely an experience that we can make sense of. I always say that of all the aspects of myself or of another, the mind, body, autonomic nervous system, emotion, spirit, soul, the one I would want to drive the bus or be in charge the least is the mind, because the mind is a problem solver. That's its job. So being a problem solver, it's always looking for problems. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? There's guilt, there's shame, there's so much aspect to the mind, and it doesn't have the toolkit to problem solve grief because grief isn't a problem. And unfortunately, in modern Western society, we're a very mental society. If you use the language of energy work, we're a very third chakra culture. And what that means is we're looking through the eye, the lens of my experience, my story, and how am I going to navigate, how am I going to think my way through something? And that's not the healthiest way to approach grief because it isn't a problem. There's no solving. This is why, in most traditional schooling for psychology, psychiatry, for mental wellness, there isn't a lot of grief training because grief is not something that is a pathology. It's not a mental illness. In fact, it's one of the most human, natural things we will all go through. I just always feel like as as a way modern Western society has really dropped the ball in how we show up for grief because we can't pathologize grief. We can't make it an illness that needs fixing. There is no fix. And so, one of the things we do in a holistic approach is we want to sort of take stock of, well, how much is this client really in their head? Because another aspect of using the mind, which just kicks in by default with most people, um, is trying to keep a lot of the emotional experience at bay. Because the mind tends to be pretty terrified of the immensity of our emotions. The heart is so much more powerful than the mind. But all these feelings are so big, and the mind really doesn't want to process them all at once. We want to come up with story, with reasoning, with, oh, I'm going to do this and then I won't feel sad, or oh, if I just do this, then I won't be angry. Or so it comes up with stories and it comes up with its own way of problem solving. But it's doing that because that's its job. So I work with clients wanting to first assess how balanced they are or how aligned they are with all aspects of the self. Are they very in their head? I like to say, are they an engineer or someone that for a living is truly, a very mind-based person, problem solving, all of that? Because sometimes what someone does for a living tells you a lot about their personality and the way they work. I look for how much they are in their body. Are they grounded? Are they showing up quite dysregulated? And I'll explain that in a moment for those of you that don't know what that means. The thing about the body is if you have people, I started out as a somatic worker. I was combining hypnotherapy, craniosacral, and touch work to do very deep dive work with clients. That was 30 years ago. And I was working only with psychologists, psychiatrists, and medical doctors so that they could add this aspect to helping their patients and clients, which frankly was incredibly cutting edge at the time. So the body will express so much. I say the body never lies. The body never lies. The body is a Ouija board of truth and of pointing you in a direction that is crying for support, that is crying to be seen, that is crying to be heard. And the mind tends to override that as well. So the mind's a beautiful thing. We want a mentally healthy approach to grief. And there are ways that we can help guide the mind into a healthier approach to someone's grief. And what that first step is usually trying to quiet the mind because it's so busy pushing to the front of the line saying, I got this, I got this. We're going to be real busy that first month with funerals and arrangements and telling people and repeating the story and getting angry about, the nurse that didn't do exactly what we wanted, and we want to blame them, and we're going to feel guilty that we didn't do XYZ. The mind really comes in front and center. So in a healthy, holistic approach with clients, we want to help bring some quiet to the mind. And oftentimes you can't just start there, though. The mind is powerful, and we're really good at it. We're good at saying, no, no, I got this. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to think my way through this. I'm going to smart my way through this. And that's just not the case with grief. Now, when you also add in traumatic experiences, maybe the death itself was traumatizing, an accident, a shock, a violent crime. I don't like a laundry list of them because, frankly, they can be quite activating to all of us. But that's where the autonomic nervous system comes in. So, very briefly, autonomic nervous system is this secondary aspect to our nervous system. The central is the brain and spinal cord, but the autonomic system is the system that is built to keep us alive. It senses danger and it either gets us to run or fight, which is the fight or flight aspect that most people are familiar with, which involves a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. And the other aspect of it in a traumatic experience is shutting down or really shutting off or sort of playing dead on a nervous system level. So one of the things that we look for is how does our client's energy level feel? Are they super activated? Okay, that's Peter. Are they super activated, maybe in fight or flight, or are they in shutdown? And with grief, we get a lot of shutdown. Um, so I do whole classes about autonomic nervous system, and I don't want to go too deep into it because it really is a lot of information. I always say there's no such thing as a little bit of information about all of this because they're all intertwined. The mind, body, ANS, emotion, spirit, soul, that's a whole human being. And so if we're only treating one with the mind, the story, and yet we're trying to have the person feel supported and we're trying to help them support themselves, if they can't turn off their mind and bring some quiet, we're not going to get to opening the heart. We're not going to get to grounding the body because they end up sort of working against each other. And what we want is to bring alignment. We want to help people use all aspects of themselves to be able to bring their own self support because we don't have access to either support groups or grief coaches or counselors or mental wellness help. It 24/7. The griever is on their own a lot. And the challenge, of course, in a modern Western society is there isn't a lot of support usually in their world. Because in their world, they have maybe the family member who's like, hey, aren't you over this yet? It's been 3 months. Or a coworker saying, wow, sorry, I forgot that you lost your mate. We've really dropped the ball in supporting people, and we want to find ways. I in particular, I like to help people find ways of even just a micro amount of showing up for themselves in tools and techniques that I share with my clients. Now, we don't want to put too much on a griever. And here's the issue. Everyone is different. Every single person and client you work with is going to come in with this different, beautiful combination of mind, body, spirit, emotions, nervous system, and soul. So using a couple of techniques that are going to help pretty much anyone right away is really helpful. So it doesn't have to be in this order. I would invite you to try a different order, not only with others, but with yourself. Because to quiet your mind, that may require that first you help the person ground in the body. Because if the body's activated, let's say you have someone with a lot of physical symptoms, insomnia, stomach ache, digestive issues, you feel that they've got a lot of shallow breathing, little puppy breaths, that you may want to just start with something I like to do where I just have people, and do this with me because this just feels good. Put your feet on the ground and just really feel, if you can kick off your shoes, that's extra helpful. Really feel the solidness of the floor, the ground, whatever's underfoot, and really bring your attention to the soles of your feet. Now, that in itself helps ground anyone to bring their attention to the body. Touch. Touch is so powerful. I have people maybe put both hands over their heart. Or I have people maybe put both hands over their belly, especially if we're going to do a little bit of breath work, putting hands on like the rib cage and feeling the ribs expand with a gentle inhale and go in on a gentle exhale. I never force these things. And in particular, you want to be very careful with breath work, because when we have people that may have had any kind of trauma attached to loss, and just the loss itself could be traumatizing. It was a safe person, it was their soulmate partner, the grounded person in their life, that breath work can be very activating. And in fact, it can really raise levels of energy. So we want to go in very gentle with breath work. You see, I have here quiet the mind and underneath breath work. So that would be something that would be very, very gentle and slow. Slowing it down really helps with grief clients. They're overwhelmed. They're probably in full dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, where they're in fight or flight, or they're in full shutdown, where when you're in full shutdown of the autonomic nervous system, you don't think clearly, you can't function, you can barely get out of bed. And then they've got the rest of the world saying, oh, you need to go for a run, you'll feel so much better, as if it's a problem that can be fixed right away. And actually, that's been shown to be harmful to that person, because it can push them even further into shutdown, because their system knows what it needs to survive and feel safe. So, first, we allow awareness. That's always my first step with grievers. We don't go in fixing, we don't go in even assessing. We start with awareness, which is a gentle place. You're over here a little more when you're aware with compassionate curiosity. You're not diagnosing anything, although only a doctor can diagnose. Grief coaches don't diagnose, we assess. You are allowing this space of just exactly how they are, because this alleviates a great deal of pressure that they're used to getting from the world, of this, oh, I did this when I lost, my mother too, and this really helped me. Like, and every person is a unique universe of what is going to be right for them and what isn't. And the real beauty of holistic grief coaching, or coaching, is, and any mental wellness that's done really from the heart and in alignment, is that the client deep inside knows exactly what's best for them. We are never deciding what's best for them. Somewhere, their soul, their spirit, their gut, their intuition, they know what's right for them. So coaching is different from, mental wellness practices like therapy and anything in the mental wellness field, in that we're really working together with clients. And I find that a lot of therapists really enjoy learning this model because it feels very different. The onus is not on you. You can't fix. There is no fix. You are showing up in this beautiful, loving, very humanistic way with another human being. And that there is such power and beauty in that. And bringing them into their own body with the grounding. Let's just start with the grounding. Feet on the floor, maybe touching hands on your heart. Movement is very grounding. A lot of studies have shown that just gentle rocking, again, really slowing things down. You might just say to a client, how would it feel to just move a little bit in your chair? First, ground the feet so they're present and in their body, and then a little bit of rocking. Rocking and rhythm have been shown to really help regulate the nervous system, because if they're not in their body and they're not regulated on some level, they can't even feel you showing up for them. I'm going to cry, sorry. It's so isolating to grieve in modern Western society. I have this I remember this quote from, I can't remember if it was a psychologist or a cultural anthropologist, because it was about a year ago that I heard it. And they said, we are wired, biologically wired, millions of years ago, to have 40 pairs of eyes looking back at us with birth, with death, with our successes, with our losses, with our initiation into adulthood, with our partnering, with our whole lives. We're wired to have a tribe experiencing everything with us. And that is not modern Westerns, at least I don't know where you live, but that's not the modern Western society that I see. They're not even looking back at us, right? That everyone is so in their own experience, their own loss, their own trauma, their own dysregulation, their own busyness, hits from the news, crazy, my God, like I have to really watch how much I even open the news app, because it creates so much imbalance in me. We weren't designed to take in this much external trauma. Ukraine, Gaza, all these things flying at us. Our nervous system was not designed for that much pain and trauma. And that's only in the last, 100, 200 years that we've even had awareness of that much of the world. Is that a good and beautiful thing? Yes. It's incredibly empowering. We get to help other people. We get to have a larger reach with our heart and our purpose and our intention. But our nervous system has not caught up with that level of taking things in. So here we are in a culture where everybody's dysregulated for the most part, unless they're really working on it. And so the griever is out in the world where the responses they get are either fix it, toxic positivity. Oh, well, at least they're in heaven now, which has nothing, okay, sure, if that's your belief system, but that has nothing to do with grief. And it's certainly not supportive. Or there might be bright siding or whitewashing. Well, at least they're not in pain anymore. Maybe all these things are true, but they're not in any shape or form supportive to the person in pain. So that's sort of a fix it. And that's probably coming from someone that doesn't have the space to show up for another person's intense pain, because it is a skill set to be able to show up for someone else's pain. And part of what I teach is not only regulating. If you're in therapy, either your own therapy or you are a counselor or a therapist, you've learned the skills to show up without being in reaction. But the challenge with grief work is, all the stories are sad. That's why they're there. It's like with mental wellness practices, you have to have some kind of regulation. The difference is, in grief coaching, it's not the blank slate approach, the tabula rasa, that is usually trained in therapy, where that's just a whole different mindset. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but that's what therapy is. Coaching is different. I like to say, you do get to show up as a human being a little bit more, instead of this space for projection and all of that, that you can tell I've been in therapy forever, right? I love therapy. Everybody needs it. I highly recommend it. But the challenge is with working with grievers is that not only, like I said, that most traditional therapy practices don't offer grief training, a therapist has to actively seek out their own grief informed practice. And having the information is very powerful, but I like to help people find ways to weave it into what they're already doing. If you are a massage therapist, let's talk how you can use my protocol in the way you already work. And certainly you can do one on one. Are you an energy worker? Are you a Reiki healer? Are you a death doula? There's so many aspects that this work plugs into that I always find it very interesting to have it transmuted into whatever works for you. But the thing about the grief work is the way we show up physically. Opening our heart to the other person is actually a part of it because this is a very human experience. All of us will experience loss in our lifetimes. Most of us will experience some form of trauma. Now, I talk about trauma only in that in my protocol and in the course, I make sure that everyone understands what trauma looks like in a griever and what is grief, because they are not the same thing and they need to be separated out because you can't get to a fully traumatized griever. And that is a situation where you should be referring that person to a trauma specialist, like a licensed mental health professional, so that you can work with them. I have a database of therapists I refer to because I know when I'm above my pay grade. It doesn't mean I don't stop working with the person for the grief part of it. I personally think that use all the bells and whistles, use all the tools you can. And I don't believe in a separation of alternative or holistic work versus traditional work. People need it all. And we don't want to make this sort of, choice for the client. I think that's deeply, it's even more traumatizing, that if that's the course for them, then we honor that and we work with it, we dovetail. So we want to be using these things to ground our client first. That means getting them in the body. So what we can do is we can even take a second here and do this with me, that have your feet on the floor and keep your spine straight. If you're reclining, and you can always listen to my workshops reclining, I'm fine with that. And just bring all your energy and attention to the soles of your feet. And this is bringing awareness. So we got a twofer here in that we're helping the person ground and be in their body so that they can show up to even hear us. But we're also really helping them regulate their system a bit, because grief and certainly trauma create a disconnect often from the body. So bringing our awareness to our feet, I like to imagine roots flowing out of the bottom of my feet, going deep down into the earth, and really creating a sense of connection and support. And then we can add in that touch. They can touch their thighs. Maybe if they want to rub their thighs, they can rub their arms, give themselves maybe a little self hug. Feels very supportive, very grounding. A little rocking. People have been using rhythm and rocking and movement since the dawn of humanity to ground and regulate. So we have a little bit of movement, and just sit with that for a while and allow them to be with that space as long as they need to. And then the next space I would move into would then be working on quieting the mind and adding in very, very slow, gentle breath work. So when we do a longer exhale, then inhale, that also slows the system down and brings the person down into a more grounded space. So before I do a little active imagination or guided imagery, whatever you want to call it, which is helping quiet the mind, I do a little bit of breath work. Because when we inhale through our nose, let's say to a count of 6, and then we exhale, but we make it longer to a count of 8. And we do that maybe 3, 4, 5 cycles. If you're in the same room with the person, you will actually feel their energy level begin to calm down. Now, rapid breath actually elevates energy, and that's the opposite of what we want to do. So we want to do some grounded breath work, shorter inhale, longer exhale, and feel them get deeper and deeper into their body. And then what I like to do is just do a tiny little active imagination guided imagery. And let's do that together. So that would be, we're in this space with our feet on the floor. We feel the roots grounding all the way down into the earth, giving us support. We want to use words like support. I call them these key words that we are planting seeds of support, of safety, of groundedness, of quiet and slowing down. Because every word we speak to a client is a gift, it's a guide. So we are careful with our language, just like a therapist is, and we're always using picture words. We may talk about the earth, how full and round it is, and how big it is, and how strong it is, allowing us so much support from, now I might say Mother Earth, unless I'm working with someone who has just lost their mother, because I would not want to activate that yet. And we want to be using these words that really envision roots and groundedness and solidness so they can feel safe in that space with me. And then what I would do, one of my favorite active imaginations, if I notice someone has a very active mind, lots of story on repeat, lots of trauma story, lots of details, lots of information, but I'm not getting any emotion out of them. Now, I'm not actively trying to make them feel anything. We never do that. The person has their own time, they have their own pace, and their whole system is working to protect themselves, probably still from big feelings. So we need to establish trust with clients. So that first session, we're showing up and we're making sure they understand, I'm not going to push you. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm here for you. And this is the kind of space we're going to hold. And so this active imagination would be, I have a million of them because I started out as a hypnotherapist doing hospice and private practice. So half the time I make them up. So I'm trying to do one that I do all the time so that I keep it brief. So this active imagination, I like to tell people that, to relax, we do the grounding work, a little touch on the body, and just being present in the body, feeling maybe some tingling in their feet, so that we're allowing that the energy is in the body, not flying around up by the ceiling somewhere because they're afraid to come in and feel things. So what I do is I imagine an old growth forest, and I imagine, ask them to see whatever comes to mind. If they don't see anything immediately, that's okay. They get to imagine it, because there is no difference between imagining it and visions or imagery coming to them. I like to explain this as the same space as dreams, and this powerful space that's connected to all things, love, the universe, all aspects of life, the body, the heart, the mind. So we can imagine this old growth forest, and it's a beautiful, safe space. Maybe we hear birds in the forest. Bringing in different senses helps deepen the experience. Maybe they can feel the earth under their feet as they imagine a pathway leading into this forest that feels so supportive, so safe, and so welcoming, and maybe even slightly familiar to them. And then what we do is we ask them to find a tree next to a creek. And they can just sit down and maybe lean up against that lean up against that tree. Don't put them in the creek. Lean up against that tree and feel the support of this beautiful huge tree, that it has its roots very deep into the earth, the solidness of it, that they can bring in some of that feeling for support. And as they sit by this creek, they can imagine any thoughts that come up. They can either write them on a little piece of paper in their imagination, they can write it on a leaf, and they get to place it in the creek and watch it flow by. Just just gets to go all the way down the creek. They can watch it swirl on the water. They can hear the babbling brook, the water moving. They can feel what it feels like to be near active water like that, how it feels soothing and peaceful and quieting. And we can have them continue to add any thoughts that come in. It's okay. We don't need that thought right now. It can get put in the creek, and it can even flow down the creek further and further and further. It goes into bigger rivers. Eventually, it goes into the ocean, where all things become one in the water. We want to help them quiet all of these thoughts, the stories, the blame, the guilt, the trauma stories, what I should have done, what somebody else did. There's so much guilt, and there's so much blame, and there's just so much activated thought in especially acute grief. But if they don't learn skills to help quiet that, I always say to grief, when they're really in this heightened grief experience, that they not only do they get to take a break from that style of grieving, but they must. If they want to grieve well, they actually need breaks from it, and they have permission to step away from the intensity of the feeling, because most grievers feel that if they stop grieving for a moment, that they are disrespecting the love and the connection. They're terrified to lose the love and the connection. So then they're being so hard on themselves that, again, it's this, they kind of beat themselves up and create even more suffering. They're going to grieve for the rest of their lives. Tomorrow, when we talk about the five stage model, we'll talk about how this is not a linear experience. There is no finish line. This is a holistic experience that requires that we have tools that help us evolve with our grief. We want to help people find ways to hold grief's hand and navigate grieving in a healthy way for the rest of their lives. Now, you may not want to say the rest of your life part right up front, because that's pretty daunting. We just want to help them find some tools to ground into the body, quiet the mind, and then, okay, I'm not allowed to have favorites, but it's my favorite because I'm an art therapy practitioner as well, and I love creative expression, because most grievers are terrified, if I start feeling all this pain, I'll never get out of it. I'm already feeling depressed and shut down, and people will use the word depression a lot. I rarely repeat that word back to them, because I am not a licensed mental health professional, and I do not have the authority or the training to diagnose or treat depression. And it's really careful that a grief coach stays in their volleyball position, because you do need to be trained to work with depression properly. But it's a word that's so thrown around in modern Western society. There was like, oh, I'm depressed today. Like, no, you're off. But what we want to do is help the person find healthy ways to move feelings, because just the feeling of the feeling, the crying, the anger, all the different emotions can be too much for them. They may not be ready. It may be more than what they're able to do in that moment, and they know that. So what I do, I'm kind of sneaky, I like to use different forms of creative expression. And I think of it as, those old fashioned pressure cookers, that they would have that little thing on the top, that we want to help sort of relieve some steam, relieve some steam, relieve some steam in little and different ways. And that's creative expression, not just emotional expression, which certainly they will probably have during sessions with you. But if you're doing group work, workshops, support groups, one on one, it's going to show up differently in different arenas. That's why I like to add some mentorship sessions with me when people take my courses, is because I do believe you each use the work slightly differently. A lot of people do a hybrid. You might want to do support groups because that's one level of support, one-on-one, writing, teaching, speaking. There's so many different ways. There's so much need. It doesn't matter what you pick. So there are people that host dinner parties with small groups, and then people get to share and be seen like the 40 pairs of eyes looking back at them. So creative expression could be movement. Now, not everybody's going to want to express themselves through movement. You get that, older white male engineer, he's probably not going to want to do some kind of interpretive dance in a session to express his pain. We have to work within the wheelhouse and the comfort zone of each client. So I like to start small, and that may be. That's why I have my board here. That may be art therapy. And art therapy is not having the person draw something and then assessing it or diagnosing through it. You're not looking for, it's not like Rorschach tests or any of that. In fact, the flow is actually the opposite. It is a form of moving things that are too big to go through the mind out through a different channel, the body. So, one really good technique in art therapy, I'm going to use a big marker so you can see it. I hope you can see my board, is this sort of non-conscious doodling. And you may have the person tell that story of some aspect of the story they've been telling, and have them just doodle and draw a line. The one thing is the line is not allowed to cross over. So that gives them some attention to this drawing that sort of starts to distract and quiet the mind. And they may do all kinds of things with it. And they could be telling that story. And then we went to the hospital, and then, we didn't know what to do. And some way we didn't get the phone call. And they're telling this story as they're doing it. And they're actually expressing, and you may find that they then move some emotion, because again, the mind is usually trying to hold all those big scary feelings at bay. Oh, no, 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 I don't want to start feeling, I don't want to start crying because I'll never stop. That's what you hear all the time. It isn't true, but we certainly can't come back and say that, oh, that's not true, let's give it a try. That would be obscene. So we want to help them find ways to blow off this steam. Another way, another art support, is even just drawing things as they're telling the story. They may be saying, like, I heard you say that. I always look for metaphors. You want to look for picture words when they're saying, I felt like I was alone on a sailboat adrift at sea. No one was there for me. I had no direction or no guidance. That is a beautiful opening and avenue to moving over to art therapy and pictures. And you may say, you know what, I'd like you to draw that. Why don't you draw that boat at sea, and let's see what comes up. And then they may say, like, gosh, it felt like I was surrounded by sharks, or I couldn't see anything. And just have them continue to draw it and flesh it out. I invite them to use color. I invite them to continue drawing on their own time every day. Art therapy is one of the most powerful creative expression tools because it's natural. Every 3-year-old draws something, and it expresses themselves, because the grief experience is not a mental experience. It is an emotional experience. They are missing the attachment. They're missing the love. They're missing the relationship. They're missing the support. There's so much emotional aspect, and emotions are a subconscious experience, whereas the mind and thoughts are usually a conscious experience. And only 10% of our mind is conscious. This is what's so funny about the mind. It's like, no, 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 I got this. I'm in charge. I'm showing up. I'm going to run the whole show. And it's really not the best equipped part of us to be running, as if you could run a grief experience, to be in charge. We want to help them connect with the body, the emotions, certainly the spirit, whatever aspect of higher self they have, that's getting into deeper work. We want to regulate the autonomic nervous system, and we want to find a soulful way for us to support them and for them to find their own way through this, because they're not going to be seeing you every day for the rest of their lives. So we're really bringing tools that help with empowerment as well, because when you think about it, grief is probably one of the most disempowering. There's no fix. It's part of the program. We're all going to pass. We're all going to experience loss and grief. And there's nothing you can do in the face of death. It is literally so much bigger than we are that it's so out of our control. So we have a lot of, so here we are in this Western culture where we think we're in control of everything, that we can think our way through. And so the mind kind of hits a grief experience at 100 miles an hour, because it's, wait a minute, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? What do I do? What do I do? There's no doing, there's no fix. So we're helping people get more balanced in these other aspects of self when maybe they weren't living that way originally before the loss. So the art therapy work, one of the reasons it's so powerful is because that lives in the subconscious, as does our physiology, our whole body's physiology, our cells uh, split, we turn uh, air, oxygen into everything it needs to be. Our brain, like our whole system subconsciously is running our entire body every moment without our conscious mind having anything to do with it. Now, obviously, you can hold your breath for a while, but for the most part, all of that's back in the subconscious. And that's where creativity is as well. So we're diving into this power space of all of these, that's where spirit is. So all of these more powerful aspects of self are in the subconscious. That's why I love art therapy. So movement is also creative expression, but this usually feels safer. And one other tool that I really like for people is letter writing. Writing a letter to the loved one, um, and is really a powerful tool. In fact, there's whole new books about it. On, they've given it a big fancy name. It's like you're writing a letter to your loved one, and you can say all the things that maybe were unsaid, or stay connected. And that's a big part, and that's the spiritual aspect, staying connected to the love. Love never dies. The connection with the loved one does not die. So you have a griever thinking it's over, they're gone from the physical. I grant you that. And that this, it really comes down to taking the attachment that was a physical attachment and helping the grief client find ways to create a new kind of attachment, so the connection and the love not only stays, but actually evolves. That's why things like creating an altar, writing letters, talking to your loved one, that's not crazy. 100 years ago, they probably thought that was a crazy person, and that would be pathological and you'd get, put away. But now we know that's actually a healthy and supportive way to help a griever. One little tidbit is in the brain. The hippocampus is a gland in the brain. And the hippocampus, one of its jobs, besides memory, is creating this three-dimensional grid of your reality. Like, okay, my kid is at high school right now. They've got the car. That's plotted in this big 3D grid in my brain. I know where the dog is. I know where my mate is. I know where work is. It's this whole reality of our physical world. So when we lose someone from the physical, the hippocampus works like a computer to try to play that program. But they're supposed to be here. They're supposed to be here. They're like, if it's a mate, I'm supposed to be aware of them laying next to me in bed, and they're not there. This creates an enormous amount of strain on the nervous system, because it's trying to run a program that doesn't exist anymore. So we want to help people find ways to use the connection, deepen the connection, communicate, and love, continue the love with the loved one. One of the ways that's been shown to do that, besides letter writing, is creating an altar, talking to the loved one. Because an altar creates, with their photo and maybe a candle, and every day practicing going to that space, that same place, like a GPS in your brain, and speaking to the loved one. Now you're plugging a spot back into the 3D grid of where they are, where your relationship to them is. And this really helps people function better. Because if you can imagine, our mind is experiencing grief. The body and the autonomic nervous system are experiencing grief. The body, like I said, could be aches, pains, exhaustion, lethargy, autonomic nervous system. And the brain, part of that is the way our brains work. So the emotions, we're supporting emotion with creative expression, and we are supporting the spirit by deepening connection. And honestly, you as an authority figure in this client's world, either as a therapist, as a grief coach, however you're showing up for them, the fact that you take that moment. So first you've settled them in the body, calming the mind, helping move feelings, bigger feelings. Again, never trying to get them to cry or feel. It's there, it's coming, don't worry. Um, what you are doing is you're getting them in a place where they can hear you and see you. And in that space, you get to give them permission to have whatever experience they're having. Not something that somebody else had, not something they read in a book, not what they think they're supposed to do, but just their reality in that moment. And that is one of the most loving, supportive things you can do, is allow and bring awareness to, I see you're really, having a lot of symptoms, or I see that you're very activated. Why don't we just hold space here? I see you. I see you. I hear you. I hear your story. I'm here is an intensely powerful gift to give someone in grief. So I have a couple little personal insights for you on your handout, and that is how asking how strong your own connection to and your awareness of your different aspects of self are. What are they? They are these different aspects we were talking about: the mind and the emotions. I have a little scale here of these different colors. Do you have a good awareness of how your mind works? Do you have a good relationship and connection with your emotions? Are you respectful of your emotions? Do you allow your emotions as they come up, or do you try to control them a little bit more? What about a relationship with your body? Do you listen to your body? Do you listen to when your body's trying to communicate with you? Maybe if you get a headache every time you've, you know, heard someone complaining for too long or something, like the body uses symptoms as a form of expression. So the body is just such a beautiful tool to guide you. Excuse me. The autonomic nervous system, understanding that if you're activated in fight or flight often, or if you're shut down, getting exhaustion, lethargy, are there things that are triggering you and activating you, that maybe you need to create some space between yourself and those things for your own self-care. Your relationship connection with spirit, whatever that means to you. If that means walking the dog out in a park, yay, that's spirit. So this could mean, when I say spirit, I'm never referring to religion. I don't work with any religious component. I believe my work can be plugged into any faith or belief system. I personally study and work with all of them, as long as I do have a strong ethos with my work, in that I don't work with groups that are going to be non-inclusive or judgmental or uh, punitive or prejudiced against the way other people live. Can't do it. So that's not my community or my work. I have a very strong connection with Well, kind of with everything, kind of with everything. But this is very humanistic work, and it's a very humanistic style. Because I like to say, like, if I'm training people to show up with compassionate curiosity, you kind of need to bring the compassion yourself. So it is really beautiful work, and it's very powerful work. And then, of course, this last aspect of, do you have a strong connection with your soul? What are you here to do? What's your life purpose? What speaks to you? What are you passionate about? And these are all things that the more we balance ourselves, the the easier it is. Believe it or not, this work can be actually quite easy. I get a lot of people saying, "Oh my gosh, Pamela, isn't that hard? It sounds so sad." And I have to say, I am so filled with life and purpose and joy and my love for people because of doing grief work. And I like to think that part of it is also because I'm genuinely helping people in a segment that is so underserved and has such an epidemic of need, the grief support need. And it also every time reminds me of how beautiful and precious life is. And that's a gift every day. And it reminds me to live my own life to the fullest. And so grief work gives back to you in a number of ways. So I have a couple questions for you to ponder and think about. And that are these personal insights on your homework. And that is, you have a healthy relationship and balanced connection with all aspects of yourself. And I love this one. How do you feel when you're aligned and balanced compared to when you're not? Because I know I feel pretty bad when I'm out of alignment. I'm cranky, I'm short, I'm frustrated, and I use these things all the time myself to get in alignment. I'd say half of my course is about the student learning my modalities because my course is about helping you become the person that does this work effortlessly and does it with love, and that it flows in a natural way, maybe not effortlessly, let's say naturally, because using who you are, like I said, you're a light catcher, you're bringing in all of this light information, tools, techniques, inspiration, further study that fills you up, that really calls to you, and you are bringing this to another and to other people, but doing it less with a set protocol and more as a natural way to you, allows you to do this work and stay in a joyful, happy, healthy, purpose filled way of working. Because caretaker fatigue is a real problem. And the statistics are horrifying. So a lot of my course is about making sure that you're learning how to support yourself in whatever you do in life. You're learning to work with whatever trauma, loss, pain you've had. How are you transmuting that? And how are you turning that from this thing that happened into something that you use as a way of living a better life? Life is short and precious and beautiful, and living your life to the fullest is the most important thing you can do as a grief coach or in whatever you're doing with your own work. So I will see you hopefully tomorrow. Wow, I finished exactly in 1 hour. If you knew me, you would be flabbergasted by that. I'll tell you that right now. But tomorrow is going to be the day about how the five-stage model, is the way that most people think, and how we end up having to undo people's expectation of what they're supposed to be doing in grief, as if it's not bad enough. Then they're coming in, ugh, judging that they're not doing it right. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And so if we can show up and hold space and as an authority figure to them, see the way they're doing it and help them release some guilt, blame, and judgment of self, well, now we're cooking with gas. That's a big deal. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And then on Monday, same time, I'm going to do that bonus class that's more about turning your own loss and pain into purpose. I mean, life, life is just, there's just so much that comes at us. But there are a lot of people who have had, either it's the uh, acute childhood experiences or loss or anything that it's, I don't want to be trite with this, and I might be saying this too quickly, but there's something in there that it's so empowering when you've really had some shit come your way to turn and say, you know what? I am going to use this and I am going to make the world a better place. And I'm going to help support people that are marginalized, or I'm going to help people that are in deep pain because I have walked this walk and I know that I can help other people in my soul tissue because my loss and my trauma changed me. So I think that's a real, you don't have to. Boy, are you lucky if you haven't been through any loss or trauma. You don't have to have had that. Please don't seek that out to do this work. But there is an element, right? There is an element to empowerment that is so beautiful when we've had hard times and we can then turn and do something good with it. And I believe in that. So thank you so much for your time. I'm always so grateful that you take time out of your very busy day to show up and be with me. Thank you. And I am going to try to put the recording in the Facebook group. If you're not in my Facebook Healers and Helpers group, please, I'll pop up. I think I have emails to everybody about that invitation. I do ongoing content in there all the time. So, and at the end of day 3 of this workshop, I'm going to have some bonuses and things. If you're interested in signing up for my course that we're starting mid-January, this module, I do work very intimately in small groups. I don't like the model that other people do where there's 300 people in the course. I want to know you. I want to know you, and I want to know what matters to you. And my God, you're this beautiful, unique universe of how you're going to use my work. I can't tell you how exciting that is to me and how I can help you do exactly what you're supposed to do to help change the world for the better. Mwah. Thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, go ahead and message me or email me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.